There are over 600 people on California death row.
Timothy McGee, 15 years on death row. He was a shot caller for a notorious gang in northeast Los Angeles. A jury found him guilty of 3 murders and the attempted murder of 2 police officers. Raymond Euler, 15 years on death row. Euler set several forest fires, including the Esperanza fire, in which 5 firefighters were killed. Gene Rices, 16 years on death row. Rices fatally shot 2 people during a liquor store robbery. Samuel Rivera, 15 years on death row. In a gang-related incident, Rivera shot into a van carrying field workers, killing 1 man and endangering 13 others. Raul Sarinana, 15 years on death row, along with Kathy Sarinana, also 15 years on death row. Raul and Kathy beat to death 2 nephews left in their care. Benjamin Wata, 15 years on death row. Wata essayed and killed a 70-year-old Seal Beach woman after she went to feed her neighbor's cats. Edward Wyckoff, 15 years on death row. Wyckoff killed his sister and her husband, claiming they sought to ostracize him from family events and steal his deceased father's house. Tony Yonko, 15 years on death row. Yonko used a hammer to bludgeon a man to death during a home burglary. Roman Aldana, 14 years on death row. Aldana was convicted of torture and murder for killing a 16-year-old runaway who was living with him after he believed she had become pregnant. He stabbed her more than 100 times. Alberto Alvarez, 14 years on death row. Alvarez shot and killed an East Palo Alto police officer during a foot chase after the officer responded to reports of a fight outside a restaurant. Jeffrey Buettner, 14 years on death row. Buettner and an accomplice, Glenn Jones, beat an 18-year-old girl to death and stuffed her body into an oil drum after she told police about their burglary activities. Anthony Kane, 14 years on death row. Kane stabbed to death his elderly aunt and uncle, both 75, in 2004 after cashing a $6,000 check against their bank account. Robert Castro, 14 years on death row. Castro received a death sentence for killing a man who balked at the arranged sale of a stolen laptop. He was sentenced to life for shooting to death another man who caught him in a home robbery. Aaron Dunn, 14 years on death row. High on meth and distraught over his marital breakup, Dunn used a shotgun to kill 2 men as they left an Elk Grove restaurant and shot at 4 others, including 2 police officers. Christopher Evans, 14 years on death row. Evans killed 2 people in a 2001 shooting following a fight at an Oakland hair salon. George Hernandez, 14 years on death row. On orders from Mexican mafia leaders, he killed another gang member believed to be a police informant, gaining rank in the gang. He claimed he feared for his own life if he disobeyed. Christopher Jasso, 14 years on death row. He shot and killed a taxi driver during an ambush robbery. Glenn Jennings, 14 years on death row. On parole after 23 years in prison for robbery, he stabbed the owner of a Sacramento liquor store to death, then stole the cash register. Mila Johnson, 14 years on death row. Johnson killed 2 roommates, both longtime friends of his, and blinded the third person during a 2006 dispute over the dividing of proceeds from a drug ripoff. Glenn Jones, 14 years on death row. Together with Jeffrey Buettner, they killed an 18-year-old girl. That was because she threatened to go to the police and tell them about their burglary activities. Jimmy Kelly, 14 years on death row. A meth addict who years earlier had killed a child during a drunk driving accident, Kelly confessed to shooting 2 men and a woman to death during a 2004 home robbery in Yucca Valley. His female companion pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. Randolph Kling, 14 years on death row. A con artist who assumed false identities, Kling killed the 2 owners of a metal fabrication business, seeking to marry the widow of one of the victims and take over the business. Talk about delusional. Travis Lewis, 14 years on death row. A Compton gang member, Lewis killed 1 man he mistook as a gang rival and shot to death another man who interrupted the robbery of a taco truck. Valerie Martin, 14 years on death row. Martin, along with her 2 teen sons and a convict, beat the man in whose mobile home she lived, put his body in the trunk of his car, and set the vehicle on fire. Alberto Martinez, 14 years on death row. He was the getaway driver for three other gang members who had been hired by a woman to kidnap and kill her brother so she could take over the family business. Two other gang members also were condemned. The woman was sentenced to life in prison. Jose Mejorado, 14 years on death row. Mejorado and three other gang members killed two female acquaintances because the young women knew about an earlier killing.
Tanya Nelson, 14 years on death row. After she lost her house and her business failed, Nelson returned from North Carolina to seek retaliation against her longtime fortune teller. She convinced an accomplice to kill the woman while she stabbed the woman's daughter to death. Rodrigo Paniagua, 14 years on death row. Paniagua stabbed to death his pregnant girlfriend and their two daughters, ages 6 and 3, then set their bodies on fire. He had a history of domestic violence. Antonio Rodriguez, 14 years on death row. He essayed and beat to death the 5-year-old daughter of his girlfriend and brutalized the woman's 6-year-old son for months. The mother was sentenced to more than 28 years for failing to protect her children and abetting their abuse. Brock Rottiers, 14 years on death row. Rottiers led two day laborers to a motel room where she promised to have relations with them. With two male accomplices, she attacked and robbed them. She then gagged the victims until they suffocated. Derlin Threats, 14 years on death row. Threats, a former Marine sergeant, tortured and stabbed the woman to death after she discovered he had broken into her home to steal her son's video games. Scott Varner, 14 years on death row. Varner and his 17-year-old accomplice carjacked a Reading woman and forced her to drive them to a remote area where he strangled her to death and robbed her. Gregory Whiteside, 14 years on death row. Whiteside killed his former girlfriend and her 18-month-old daughter. He then slit his own wrists and lay down next to the bodies, but was discovered in time. David Zanon, 14 years on death row. A felon released from prison, Zanon was fleeing police in a car packed with stolen goods when he struck and killed a California Highway Patrol officer attempting to stop his car with a spike strip. Cimarron Bell, 13 years on death row. Bell and an accomplice used a car sales ad to lure three people to a home to rob and murder them. He fatally shot his girlfriend in the head because he suspected she was stealing from him. Kevin Bernoulli, 13 years on death row. Bernoulli, a Los Angeles gang member, was convicted in 2011 of a 2006 murder. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.